My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
There will be those that argue that actually, it was the previous government that sold fishermen down the river in the first place by allowing Europeans access to fishing grounds for as long as they did.
Well, it was 1973 that, if that's what you mean, when Edward Heath, basically under the advice of the Treasury, basically decided to trade away UK fishing rights.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that talks with you, not at you. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith, here to help you put down the keyboard and take action instead.
Our aim is simple: to take the heat but not the light out of the debate, to nourish the mind and lift the heart.
And we are exactly 1 year old today! Happy birthday, Quiet Rioters! Now, once you've stopped humming the happy birthday song for us, get comfy, turn up the volume, and help us begin another Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
And I'm the producer Kenny, sliding the sliders, dialing the dials, and doing who knows what to the knobs.
You have actual script. I even warned you that you had actual script today and you just ignored it.
Stop pretending you didn't put in the gratuitous knob reference.
Okay, all right.
So, on a serious quick note, we are not ignoring the subtle but crucial change of the UK government's position on the conflict in Gaza, and we are going to cover it for Sunday school, and we're going to get an expert guest in to discuss that as well.
Always better to have people who know what they're talking about. But today, as promised, we will concentrate on Labour's performance at the local and mayoral elections, their position in the polls, whether the threat of reform is overstated, what the right stance going forward should be, as well as bring you much more on the UK-EU reset and what happens next.
Plus, the government has been criticised by many for its approach to welfare reform, while there is also almost universal acceptance that there is some systemic problem with participation in the labour market. So what is the right policy for helping more people back to work without penalising those who simply can't?
To help us with all that, we are delighted to welcome the chair of the PPA, that's the UK-EU Parliamentary Partnership Assembly, Labour MP for Battersea and owner of the best giggle in Parliament, I am reliably informed. Making her Quiet Riot debut, it's Marsha de Cordova. Welcome, Marsha.
Hello and happy first birthday. Let me start by saying that.
Thank you.
Ain't I lucky to be
Haven't
here?
we grown?
We'll be walking soon and everything.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
Oh, Marsha, I'm going to abuse my position today to lobby you.
Go on.
Because I live just over the river from your Battersea seat, and I am desperate for the footbridge to get approval so I can nip over the river to the park, to the power station in a few minutes. So please can you push Wandsworth and Westminster to just get on with it? That would be great. That's the first thing to say.
There's more.
Much more importantly, your seat has seen major regeneration in recent years, but it is still home to several council estates, and contrary to popular belief, not everyone that lives there is a multimillionaire. So how do you balance the needs of such a diverse constituency as Battersea?
That's such a great question, and it's all noted about your lobbying. Well done on that point. I feel representing Battersea, it really is an honour and a privilege to do so. And like many London constituencies, you've got this mishmash of, you've got affluent, wealthy people, but then you also got working class communities, as well as, there are parts of my constituency that are in poverty. And so for me, I feel as though I have highly engaged, but also with high need. Yeah. So my mailbag, for example, is always full of those issues, whether it's on Gaza or whether it's on, us exit in the EU, to bread and butter issues around immigration, housing, getting their children into schools and so forth. And how I balance that, I have a great team, but also I make sure that I'm visible and present for my constituents. I represent one of the youngest constituencies in the country.
Oh, really?
So, yes, Battersea has got a lot of young folk there as well. Starting out, graduates just kicking off their careers, folks like that. And so for me, it's just always kind of being in tune with what's going on. So I'm very involved in my constituency. I like to think I am a good community champion in Battersea, but also I am raising and being a voice for the voiceless here in Westminster as well. And I hope I do a good job. It's going to be my 8th birth anniversary next month. So hopefully, 3 elections in, the people still want me.
Well, I've campaigned with you in a winter general election.
Oh, that was awful.
And a really boiling hot summer general election. And I can tell you that the name recognition of Marsha in this seat is incredibly high. But do you long for a nice, balmy spring general election next time around? Because I definitely do.
I certainly do. But you know what? I would just never want a winter election ever again. It was just awful. It was grim. It was awful. Very grateful that I won and I was re-elected and all the rest of it. But it was tough. So, May elections, I feel that's the right time of year.
Agreed.
Not in July. May.
Yeah, perfect.
Quiet, riot.
Now, as the UK and EU take some tentative but symbolically important steps towards repairing the relationship fractured by Brexit, all eyes were on this week's UK-EU summit, one of the most substantial bilateral engagements we have seen in years. If you've not yet listened to mine and Alex's rapid reaction Midnight Mash show, go and have a listen to that first and then pop back in here. While the agreements announced around agri-food and emissions trading were framed as technical, they represent a broader shift in tone, from managed hostility to cautious cooperation. But as ever, beneath the choreography, there are questions about any of this will see the light of day, what legal frameworks are yet to be established to deliver it, about ambition, about pace, and about whose priorities are being advanced, France, and whose are being left behind, most of UK industry. So we're going to talk a bit more about what was encouraging.
Baby steps.
What was missing and where Labour needs to go next in pushing for meaningful cooperation, particularly in 2 crucial areas that are a bit unresolved. We've got the UK's access to SAFE, the €150 billion defence fund, and a desperately needed youth experience scheme. Plus, we're also going to be bringing you some more reflections on Labour's performance at the recent local and mayoral elections, including where the Labour Party saw strength, where the warning lights might be flashing, and how the party should approach next year, because in 2026, we've got Holyrood elections, Senedd elections, London all-up council contests, among others, on the horizon. So, Marsha, as chair of the UK-EU Parliamentary Partnership Assembly,
Yay.
or PPA from now on,
Yes.
You work really directly with European counterparts to rebuild working relationships,
Absolutely.
keep dialogue open. So for listeners who just aren't really aware of the PPA, can you tell us more about what it does and why you chose to take on that role?
Well, I'm passionate about Europe, and I represent a constituency which has got many Europeans that choose Battersea as their home and not wanting to bring up Brexit, but have to. We voted 78% to remain. So exactly. Yeah. So for me, it was the right fit. So when I was asked to take it on, I absolutely agreed to do so. And as the UK chair, I work, as you rightly outlined, Naomi, with my European counterpart so it's 2 delegations. You've got the UK delegation and then you've got the delegation from the European Parliament. Yeah. And we're all cross-party MPs. Yeah. So UK, it's 35 of us and we're a mixture from the Labour Party and the Lib Dems as well as 4 Tories. The purpose really is to kind of bring some oversight and scrutiny of the Trading Cooperation Agreement. That's why it was formed, the PPA. But also it's an opportunity for us to kind of exchange ideas and rebuild some of those relationships. I always, we've had our first meeting this year back in March, and I felt like over those 2 days, it was a really good opportunity to start to rebuild and reset from our perspective. And, when I was speaking to colleagues from the European Parliament, but also the UK Parliament, I said, this is the first meeting under a Labour government, right? And that really does signal for me a turning of the page and a fresh start.
Yeah.
And that kind of was what we came out of the meeting as well, because at each of those meetings, we do come forward with a recommendation that is agreed by the entire delegation. So that's 70 of us. And that is sent to the Commission, but also to the UK government, of which they must respond to. And much of that, the recommendation that we put forward were around the issues that we know are a challenge, whether it's around youth mobility, whether it's around security and defence, but also around breaking down some of those barriers to trade, and also around climate change as well, and AI and so forth. So as a result of the summit on Monday, I felt that it was a real positive first step towards rebuilding that relationship, because if we compare where we were 12 months ago to where we are today, we're in a different space. Totally different. And that's a 360. And I don't think we shouldn't be proud of what our government and what they're doing, the European side of things as well, because we all recognise, yes, we chose to leave, right? And I get that. But, you know, we want to have that closer alignment. And I think it would just be bonkers if we didn't seek to do that.
Yeah. And we're in a different space, genuinely, not just politically, not just because of the change of government, but we would be in a different space even if it were still a Conservative government, is what I'm trying to say with what Trump is doing. And the structures we know are collapsing. And so you have to choose who you hug closer and who you put a bit of distance towards, I guess.
Absolutely. But also, you know, you say potentially we would have been in a different place geopolitically with the changes in government in the United States, but also what's happening in Europe as well, right? And then obviously we've also got a war happening as well in Ukraine due to, you know, Russia's aggression there. So things are changing. And so it's really important. I mean, we've been able to align ourselves with Europe on the issue, let's just say with the war, showing our way in that space as well. And that's important. But also, wouldn't it just seem absurd for us not to want to have some sort of security and defence partnership with our closest neighbours and allies? And that, to me, is just being pragmatic. But also, there's a dose of common sense in that as well. And that's why it's the first step towards building, I would like to say, closer alignment. Obviously, I'd love us to go further. Obviously, I want more, but I recognise things take time. And it's one step at a time.
Dear Keir, what we have agreed today is historic. It will make a real difference to people in the UK and across our union. But the message we are sending to the world today is equally, if not more important. It is a message that at a time of global instability, and when our continent faces the greatest threat it has for generations, we in Europe stick together. A strong EU-UK relationship is of fundamental importance for that, for our security, for our prosperity, for our shared destiny on this continent.
And on the EU side of the PPA, how cohesive are they in agreeing with what should be pushed forward to the Commission on their behalf? So it feels like the UK delegation, even with these four Conservatives, probably all broadly think, you know what, youth mobility is a good thing. Getting a better deal on some trade things is a really good idea. Do you get the sense that on the EU side, different member states are as in agreement with each other as the cross-partiness of the UK delegation is?
I think that because obviously politically, you've got to look at the representation. I mean, it goes all the way from the left to the right. I mean, you've got and everything in between. So naturally, they probably have a bit more of a job in terms of seeking that kind of agreement, but also building consensus in many areas. But I feel as though the recommendation, for example, that we produced by the end of our assembly meeting was agreed by most people in the room. I think it literally was the Conservatives that voted against it, which is expected. So I feel as though people recognise where we need to be and where we want to be. And I don't think you'd choose to be on the assembly if you were there to be disruptive. Don't get me wrong, though, there is robust debate. And I think that's really healthy. That's exactly what we need, because we can all learn from that and grow from things. And also, you never know, there might be things that you want to add in or take out. So I feel as though there is commitment on it, and I look forward to us hosting in the autumn here in London.
Next time it's here. I mean, it feels to me that we just need more of that kind of discursive policy making across all democratic mechanisms. It it feels like doing the work of the PPA at large would maybe help soothe a lot of the tensions, when you look at PMQs and it's just ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. And I think most people watching it think, you're all adults. Why can't you just sort of calmly have robust discussion and then come to an agreement about the best way forward? I'm going to ask you another question, and that's around what was in and what was out from Monday and what your view on all of that is. We had big announcements on agri-food, on emissions trading. Were those the priorities you were hoping that would come out of the non-defence side of everything? And was there anything missing that you were a bit disappointed about?
Let's take the positives first. I know this is what the UK government wanted, and as did I, because I represent Battersea, which has a number of small businesses and so forth. So having an SPS agreement for me in place was the right thing to do. And I was really pleased that we made some progress on that.
Yeah.
Because when you speak to businesses like I have to, they are so frustrated by all of the bureaucracy and the red tape. So any loosening of that can only be a win-win. I understand about it's going to now be about implementation and what that looks like. But that for me is progress, because that wasn't there before. I have Covent Garden Market in my patch as well, and they deal in fresh produce, right? And so for them, anything that's going to make things easier, that's going to be a good thing. The signals around...
And flowers, for the flower industry.
The flowers, for them, it's huge for them. Getting it in from the ports, it has been a challenge for them. If we can see improvements, that I know that will be greatly welcome. And I know that small businesses will welcome it as well, because one of the things that I've seen over the past few years is just the significant impact that it's had. I've hosted round tables, I've had meetings, and I'm always out doing walkabouts on my high streets, and just to kind of get a flavour of what has been the consequences of us leaving the EU. And they've just been very open about it, and so I'm hoping that now this might be a bit of good news for them in that space. And what's been useful is you look at all the different trade bodies, whether it's the CBI or the FSB or the Chamber of Commerce.
Small business, big business,
they are
loads
all welcoming. They are welcoming this, because there wasn't any agreement on this previously. So to go from zero to something else, I think it's going in the right direction. Yeah. What would I like to have seen more of? I definitely wanted to see some sort of youth experience, mobility, exchange, opportunity, whatever you want to call it.
Bob, we've settled on Bob.
We'll call it that. That's fine.
Just call it Bob.
But we need something in that space. As I say, I speak to young people all the time. As I said earlier, I represent one of the youngest constituencies. Giving opportunities for young people is a key priority for me. Whether that's giving the opportunities to broaden their horizons, whether it's culturally, to study, to work, or to have an apprenticeship. I think it's important that we create those opportunities for them. However, at least this has been discussed, and it's a move in that direction. For touring artists, I think we really have to make progress on that. And
that was a manifesto.
And that's a manifesto commitment, as was the SPS as well. On Tuesday, when the Prime Minister made his statement in the House of Parliament, I really pushed him on this issue, because I said to him, I recognise the complexities around this, but I wanted to seek some assurances from him that he would continue to work hard in this area to achieve some sort of deal or agreement going forward. And that's why, going back to the summit itself, it was the first summit, okay? And that doesn't mean it's going to end here. They're going to be held on an annual basis. That really will give us something to kind of build towards each year. And so, we can also assess and evaluate where we are in 12 months' time, but also what is the next stage. And so touring artists, for me, is an area that I would like to see movement on.
And you've got 2 PPA meetings potentially between now and the next summit. So
precisely,
you can use that to drive it forward.
And we would do that. And again, with the youth experience, whatever we want to call it, Bob, whatever we're going to call it. We want to see progress on that as well. And I think there is an absolute appetite for it from both sides as well, because we all recognise the value and importance. There are so many of my colleagues that were able to benefit from the Erasmus scheme, right? Yeah. Like, imagine that opportunity has been taken away.
Yeah. Can I just ask, Marsha, on that front, given how young your constituency is...
Well, you can say how young I am.
Okay, all right.
That too.
So much travel. Let's go back to Bob. Given how young your constituency is, how high up the list of things that of importance are European relations? Because we know up and down the rest of the country, the topics that are accepted to be top of the list in terms of immigration, health services and such like. Do you have a particularly engaged constituency when it comes to European relations? And has it changed over the last year?
I certainly have a highly engaged constituency on this issue. Many of my constituents are part of the European movement for Wandsworth. Right. And I'm actually I'm a vice president of the actual European movement itself, which is...
There we go.
There you go. Yeah. So, but to answer your question, the main issue is always going to be cost of living and the economy. That's always going to be a big factor. But, a few weeks ago, ahead of Europe Day and ahead of VE Day, I was able to, I was asked to meet with a group of young people. I'd say about 100 of them, about 120 young people. And they were so engaged on so many of these issues. And I thought, well, these are the folks that we need to be speaking for.
Yeah.
Okay, these are the folks that we need to break down those barriers and create opportunities for them.
And we need them to do it, Marsha, because when Best of Britain polls youth mobility, it's really popular across the country. We do it by constituency, and even in Clacton, they're very supportive of it. But they don't really care about it. So to Kenny's point, their priority is the cost of living. Can they get to see their doctor? How often does the bus service arrive? So we need young people to go out and make the rest of the country care about it, so that the government and the EU Commission get that there is a real political gain from doubling down and really going for this and getting it sorted out. So, hey, all the amazing young people that probably don't listen to this podcast but probably should,
get involved.
You need to get on the Bob bandwagon.
Absolutely.
That's our next T-shirt coming to a store near you.
But also, I think we need to actively change the conversation, because the philosophical choice of whether as a country you are open to the world or insular feeds into the cost of living. It feeds into your health service. It feeds into immigration, all of that stuff. And so I think the key is to stop talking about Europe as a separate topic.
We are Europe.
But we are Europe. We absolutely are. We are.
And it's part of everything.
Exactly.
And I think the
You
other
shouldn't
thing,
silo it off.
given the diversity of your constituency that we talked about at the top of the show, we cannot frame this as a middle class pursuit, that this is an opportunity for middle class young people to go and have a nice gap year. We need to talk about the young people that want to go and, as you mentioned, like do apprenticeships or a season DJing at a club,
working in a bar or whatever.
Exactly, working in a bar. It's not about being an au pair or working in a ski chalet. I think that's the other really important thing to get across, because otherwise it's too easily framed by those that reject it and don't want it as, this is about cheap young foreign labour coming in here to take jobs and depress wages while our middle class kids swan around Switzerland having a nice winter.
It's the opposite, if anything.
And it's the opposite.
Well, it is the opposite.
My experience is that middle class families find ways of sending their kids abroad for that kind of
they will do anyway, right?
Yeah.
But I also find it hugely patronising when people try to, frame this as just a middle class issue. It's doing down other groups, our working classes, saying that they don't have aspiration or they don't want to travel, broaden their horizons and learn about different countries and cultures and spaces.
I bet you've got a lot of people in your constituency under 30.
Yeah.
And they do speak other languages, and many of them will speak French and Spanish and, whatever else. And so it's not just that, this isn't open to young Brits because they don't speak other languages. They do.
Of course they do. And that's it. I mean, I also have some French schools in my constituency. So, that just shows you just how it goes broad and it goes deep. And that's why, for me, as you say, the polling is there. It's clear. Most people are broadly in favour of these schemes. But let's open it up to everybody. As you've already highlighted, right? With some folks, they already know how to play the system. So, let's make sure that it's inclusive for everybody to have those opportunities. And that's what I want to see. It's about opportunity. And giving our young people those opportunities, regardless of their background, their education, or where they're from.
Yeah.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
They don't want to fix this problem because it benefits them. It benefits them not to fix it. Party before country. It's very good he's standing in for the member for Clacton, I have to say. There was no sign of him yesterday at the EU. So he was the first through the E-gates somewhere to south of France.
Okay, it was a spanking. It was horrible, right? The local elections. What are the silver linings? What are the things in there that Labour can hold on to and build on going forward, I guess.
Right, okay, you're not wrong. It was a tough night for all the big parties, but I think you have to listen to what the electorate are telling you. You can't always focus on what you hear in a focus group.
Yeah.
You've got to listen to what the electorate are telling you. And when they're telling you winter fuel, changes to social security support, these things that matter to them, you've got to rethink your choices. Now, Naomi, you highlighted we've got big elections next year, not least in London. So we want to ensure that people are going to vote for us because we want to deliver the change that we promised, but also what we want to do locally for our communities as well. You know, we lost 2/3 of the seats that we were contesting. That's huge. And a by-election as well, albeit by 6 votes, but every vote counts, right? In this, it's a numbers game. So it's going to be so important to kind of take stock of what happened and seek to do better in 12 months' time, because we don't have a choice. The country needs us. We've had 14 years of the other lot who, in my view, destroyed so many of our public services and made...
Well, according to Kemi Badenoch, you need to stop whining about the last 14 years.
We can't really take much of what she says seriously
on
one hand. But on the other hand, you know, that when they came in, I remember 15 years ago, they didn't stop. I mean, they were still whining about Labour last year.
Still going around with our frigging
the money.
Yeah, you know, so you really can't take them seriously, really, at this stage in the process. You know, at least give us a few more months before you complain about us moaning. But they did leave the country in a mess. Let's not you know, make any bones about that.
Look, the problem always is that with big tent parties, there is a difficulty in discerning what voters are telling you. Of course, it's right to listen to what voters are telling you, but isn't there a problem that voters in X place are telling you a very different thing from voters in Y place? Or are there things that sort of unite voters' satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the government?
Yeah, of course there are. The cost of living and the economy is the priority issue. I know folks say it's immigration, but that might be an issue, but it's not the top issue. The top issue across the country it has been the cost of living and the economy. And so that for me is what we want. People will only see that they're doing better off based on their wages and how much money they have to spend at the supermarket or whatever. And if there's no change there is nothing you can say or do that will change that. You can say, oh, well, the economy's grown. But if somebody isn't feeling that growth in their own kind of personal finances, then it doesn't matter. And that's the thing. It's about changing, improving people's lives. I think that is the issue that unites people from the north, the south, the east, the west. It's about bringing about that change to their lives. People will try and bringing certain issues. People talk about immigration a lot, right? And I mean, I have my own personal views around that. But I feel as the Labour Party, we should be trying to share and influence our values of social justice, of equality, of caring and trusting.
Of internationalism.
And internationalism, importantly. Those are the things that I think we should be sharing and teaching, because you can never out-reform or outright the right, in my view, right? And I think that would be wrong politically for us to do that anyway.
And actually, because even when you strip down people's concerns about immigration, a lot of them are economic. Actually, when it comes down to they're about competition for services or housing or depressing wages.
We're more than in London. We are the most diverse city, London, and we don't have those issues around immigration in London.
It's interesting.
So I think that's quite interesting, isn't it?
No, it's always there's always an inverse relationship between places that have the places that have the least immigration are usually the most sceptical.
Yeah, interesting. I find that.
Not Scotland, though.
Is that something? Well,
that's true.
Is that something that splits the sort of ministerial level in your party, aside from the backbenchers? You sometimes get the impression that there are two pools of wisdom, let's use that word, sitting within the party, and everybody in the backbench might have a slightly different set of focuses, if that makes sense, to those who are in the posh offices.
I'm not sure I can speak to that because I'm not in that space. Do you know what I mean? I can only really speak to the spaces that I'm occupying on this issue.
Yeah, but you know the people.
I certainly do. And I'm, for example, you know, there was a lot of commentary about the Prime Minister's migration speech that he made about 10 days ago.
Yeah.
Be wrong.
Yeah.
Rubbed me up the wrong way, I have to
I won't
tell you.
say what it did from my perspective, because I was not happy with that.
Yeah.
It was the wrong language. That's not who I believe he is as a person. No. And that certainly, that language does not align with the Labour Party and our values and our beliefs, right? It was poor choice in my view. And he should not have spoken like that, because I am the grandchild. My grandparents, they came here as part of the Windrush generation. And they came here because they were invited here, okay? And they came here and they've worked. They built lives here for my family and my mum and so forth. And so
they've bred an MP.
Well, there's that as well. So to kind of talk about people in that way was just plain wrong. He shouldn't have used that language. And I was really disappointed in him.
Where's that pressure coming from for him to make a speech like that? Is it Farage? Is it that they're so fearful now that the next Prime Minister is going to be Nigel Farage that they are tacking to that, trying to out Farage point that you made earlier so well?
Yeah. He said it himself, like reform are our main opposition. And so maybe that potentially is the choice of language and the response he wants to give to that. It's the wrong one, because actually all the polling shows and all the evidence shows, there was something out today on Sky News that shows we are bleeding votes to the left flank.
Much
the
more.
progressive
side.
7
times more likely.
7 times more, right? So where would you put all your eggs? I would go that way. I wouldn't worry about them because you can't outright them. They are not going to vote for you. They'll vote for the real thing. Okay?
Yeah, and the big advantage being that one direction is authentic to you and your party and the other direction isn't.
Exactly.
So why would you go towards the less profitable direction vote-wise that is also unnatural for you? I mean,
and that's
it's just crazy.
That's why you have to be out there talking to people all the time. Focus groups and so forth, they have their place, but actually being on the doorstep and meeting people, that to me is where you hear, because that's what I do.
Yeah.
I like to be out meeting my constituents and talking to people regularly, because you get a measure of how people are feeling.
Yeah.
And that then feeds and helps to shape the work that I do in representing them.
So, Marsha, if you were Prime Minister,
when you are Prime Minister,
what would be your tactic to lead the Labour Party to victory at the next election?
I'm hoping by the time the election is called, okay, the country is in a much better position economically.
Yeah.
We've had growth. People are feeling that in their own kind of daily and personal finances. We're going to continue to build on the achievements we've made in terms of delivering public services, whether that's through the RNHS and whether that's through education, but also housing, because that's a priority for my constituents, ensuring that we build more homes, but more homes that are genuinely affordable for people to buy, but also to rent as well, because that's crucial. Once somebody has a home to live in, all other areas of their life can then flourish, whether that's through their career or whether that's through starting a family. That's the foundations for you. So I just feel as though, we want to create a society, a more equal society, closing some of those challenges around the inequalities in wealth and in health as well. So we'll be in a better place. But the Prime Minister has been clear, this is a 10-year plan for him. But, after the first term in government, we should be able to see some fruits of that.
Yeah. For me, that is part of the problem with Starmer, that he's so focused on the 10-year thing that he's in danger of wasting the first 5 years to earn another 5.
Well, you won't get to earn that 5 years. You've got to use the time you have
to govern
and to deliver change.
Rather than just triangulate.
Yeah, well,
so,
your words.
My words.
Right, it's time for the part of the show where Alex trawls through the most wildly exaggerated culture war battles so that you don't have to. From furious headlines about imaginary threats to furious politicians chasing imaginary enemies, to new attempts to ban compassion from the curriculum, we are here to unpack it all. It's time, of course, for Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey.
Take it away, Alex.
Scientists, tells us the Daily Mail, confirm woke change made to Barbie over the course of 35 years. But did you notice it?
What? Sorry. So, I know when the Barbie film came out, they hated that a lot.
Yeah, until it made $1 billion. And then they found some way to say that it was actually anti-woke.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, as soon as it made a
Feminist
shed
Barbie,
load
not
of
woke.
money. Yeah. No, the go woke, go broke crowd went very quiet. But no, so this is about the inclination of Barbie's toes. Apparently.
Toes?
Yeah.
Toes?
Does she even have to find toes?
From being tippy toes.
Oh, flat shoes.
Barbie has now gone from being 100% tippy toes so that she could wear high heels. Barbie has now gone to
Birkenstock Barbie.
60% flat feet. But
That's a wedge Barbie then, isn't it?
I love the way this is framed. This sentence in the Mail was just delicious. It says, also, employed versions of Barbie are more likely to have flat foot posture than fashion-focused dolls, largely because dolls in careers are less likely to wear high heels.
Dolls in careers, eh?
Dolls in careers. Is this for
Not
real?
women in careers. Dolls. This is absolutely real.
Daily Mail, real world knocking on the door.
Because, as a doll, if you have a career, you want to be comfortable, right? I mean, a career other than being a doll, which is obviously your main occupation. Yeah.
In the box.
Surely this is just AI writing now. There's no actual journalist byline.
Well, there is a journalist in the byline.
Oh.
Yeah, I won't embarrass them by giving their name. But anyway, so that's the topic. The topic is how this has happened. And then the piece takes a bit of a turn.
Okay.
And it says, in the real world, meantime,
Where dolls don't have jobs.
Health professionals have discouraged the use of high-heeled footwear due to issues such as permanent posture problems and foot pain. However, many of those health conditions are highly prevalent in the general population with low or no high heel use.
Are they prevalent in the doll population?
And they go on to say that women shouldn't feel forced out of high heels.
Oh, dear.
And the final quote I want to bring you is, Barbie clearly makes sensible determinations regarding her body autonomy. High heel wearers should have that same ability.
Oh my God!
I don't even know what is going on in this. It really does seem to move from a place where it thinks Barbies are actual
humans.
Anyway, so this week, I guess flat shoes are woke.
Well, men, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
men. Mainly woke.
Oh my God.
Well, thank you, Alex. And listeners, if you stumble across any more instances of egregious wokery, send them into quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Quiet Riot. How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
Now, if there is one thing that runs through today's guest's career like a stick of rock, both in politics and in the charity sector, it is her advocacy for the rights of people with disabilities. So she is someone who has thought about the help and support the state should provide longer and more deeply than most of us. She has therefore been one of the most vocal, but also constructive, I have to say, critics of the government's proposed Pathways to Work Green paper. Liz Kendall gave a speech on Wednesday morning, once again defending the plan. Let's have a listen.
Future dependent on benefits alone is not good enough, because all the evidence shows hundreds of thousands of sick and disabled people want to work. That when they have a government that is on their side and provides the right support, they can get work. And that this can transform their lives. Our task is urgent. Not just because we only have 4 more years of this Parliament, which is no time at all, although this is true. Not just because we must deliver real change to fight the rise in support for populists, although we must, but because the people who we came into politics to serve cannot and should not wait any longer for a chance to build a decent life, because they have waited far too long already.
Poverty is consistently higher among people with disabilities, with the average person already spending over £1,000 a month more to achieve the same standard of living as their non-disabled cohort, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Marsha, I think you wrote that some of the proposed changes left you frankly terrified. What do you think is the most problematic of those proposed reforms? Like, what is the thing that really puts your back up?
Okay, so I'm going to have to give you 2, sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
So the proposed changes to PIP, personal independence payment, is the first one. And I can go into details if you want. And the second would be the changes to the support or the health-related element of universal credit.
Yeah.
As you highlighted, disabled people have additional costs, and it's around about an additional £1,000 a month. And just so you know, the payments combined, PIP and universal credit, don't meet that anyway, right? And understand, universal credit is an income replacement form of social security support.
So it basically doesn't even bring the average person with disabilities level as it is.
As it is. Where we are today, it doesn't do that. And so to seek to want to reduce that and cut that from, it's going to be thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, in my view, is the wrong choice. It's wrong morally, it's wrong economically, because it's going to cost the state more in the long run, but also politically. And so I feel that there is time for the government to pause bringing forward any legislation that would seek to cut the level of personal independence payment that is paid to disabled people, because we know what PIP is there for. It's to help meet some of those additional costs.
And a lot of people are in work and receive
Nearly
PIP.
half of the people in receipt of PIP are in work. So if you seek to take that away from them, what is that going to do? Isn't it going to push them away from work and out of work potentially?
I looked up the 2024 stats, which are the last ones I could find. And there are a few things. First of all, almost a quarter of PIP recipients are not of working age. And almost half have health issues, which mean they will never be able to work.
That's right.
And so of the remainder, half are already in stable full-time employment. So you are talking about a really small number of people.
1/8 of the total.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask is that does the issue actually begin with discussing all of these changes under the umbrella we hear from Kendall, getting Britain working? Because personal independent payments are not an out-of-work benefit.
This is it, isn't it? And I think I feel as though people aren't really fully understanding the social security system and the different parts of it. Because as you're highlighting with PIP, it isn't an out-of-work benefit. The out-of-work benefit or the income replacement benefit is universal credit. Okay, and they're making changes to that. But we just park that to one side. If we think about personal independence payment and why people have to jump through hoops, for a very cruel and flawed assessment framework to even get the support that they need, okay, then they get it. That does help them to kind of live some form of quality of life. And then you wanting to say, actually, we want to cut the number of people that are in receipt of it. The Resolution Foundation published a really good report yesterday that really analysed these changes and what the impact is going to be. And they've estimated around 800,000 people would potentially lose, but this is by 2930, would lose the daily living component of their PIP, and 400,000 would just lose their PIP altogether. Okay, because PIP comes in 2 elements, right? And mobility and daily living.
There's one thing that I think listeners need to know who aren't so familiar. You've got the literal cash that PIP gives you. And then there are the non-cash benefits that being a PIP recipient offers. So PIP is a passport to applying for other things. So if you are a disabled person who is eligible for a freedom pass, some kind of travel
blue badge,
exactly, and you have PIP, then it's much easier for the authority or the awarding body of that extra benefit to say, okay, fine, if you're in receipt of PIP, then you do qualify and no problem. If you are going to lose the PIP, you do not lose your eligibility for a blue badge or for getting free travel in your local area or myriad other things. Then the assessment to go through to apply for those things is absolutely torturous. It takes a huge amount of time.
And each of them separately.
And it takes energy that a lot of people do not have to do that. Cognitive ability that maybe they struggle with, etc. And it will take them a lot longer, meaning that they'll be trapped at home for longer. So there's that. The other thing I'd love to ask you about, Marsha, because we talked about immigration and the rhetoric around immigration, as part of that speech, the announcements that visas for social care were going to be limited. I talked to disabled people last week who were saying to me, well, I need care to get me up, dressed and ready for work. And there aren't enough people to come and do that as things stand. If you are going to be trying to open more opportunities for people to get back into work, and that bit of it I think we're all going to talk about in a bit is great, and we do want to make it easier for those who can and want to work to access it. But might they then be in a situation where they can't, because we're so restricting and underfunding social care, that there will just be no one there in the morning to help them get up and get ready so that they can take up that job opportunity? I mean, that there is an interconnectedness.
It's interconnected, and it's a cumulative impact as well that isn't, as you rightly say, isn't being looked at. I was at a lobby this afternoon. There was a disability lobby in Parliament today, and I went along to meet some of my constituents were there, but also speak to other disabled people, and they brought up the social care element, or as I like to call it, it's about independent living. It's enabling people to live independently by being able to come into their home to help them get ready to go out and live their lives, right? And that isn't even perfect right now, because some disabled people won't even qualify for that level of support when they should, right? But if we're going to seek to kind of restrict labour in terms of who can come to this country and work in some of those sectors, then what does that say about how we value the lives of disabled people? I'm a strong believer in the social model of disability. Okay, I see it as the societal barriers that disable us, and I strongly believe in the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People, and all of those pillars are about our human rights, whether it's the labour market, whether it's access to support for independent living, or whether it's around accessing social security support. Those pillars are there to enable disabled people to live a free and independent life. And the moment you start chipping away at them, that things will start to unpack. And we've seen that over the past 14 years. Sadly, I am old enough to remember the 2010 coalition and their supposed welfare reforms. They abolished what was called Disability Living Allowance, or DLA, replacing it with PIP, with the sole intention of reducing the numbers of people that could claim support. Obviously, that didn't work for them.
Yeah, and the assessments were a nightmare, and then they abolished that.
They abolished the Independent Living Fund, which was, again, about helping disabled people to live independently. These things have already happened. So to then be coming forward with further cuts, just kind of almost deepening the hostilities towards disabled people, because that's what it feels like to many of us, what this government are doing is wrong. And that's why I say it's the wrong choice. And I plead with my government to rethink this. You absolutely cannot press ahead with these cuts, because the impact will be devastating. Many people have lost their lives as a result of having their support cut in the past. Okay?
There will be more headlines like that. I remember them during the coalition.
Remember? Yeah, exactly.
During coalition, there were headline after headline of people that were dying, or
their benefits were cut, suicide. People taking their own lives. There's a raft of evidence to suggest they were all linked as well. And the only difference is this would be happening under a Labour government. And that's why, because we are the party of social justice. And that's why I strongly hope that they will not go forward. Now, when I think about the Pathways to Work Green Paper on the employment side, I am fully on board with the investment and that they want to put into employment support, because good, targeted, well-funding and well-resourced employment support is crucial. But there's another element that goes along with that. So I chair the Your Party group on eye health and visual impairment. And we did an inquiry into employer attitudes of employing blind and partially sighted people. And what our research showed us, which was YouGov did the polling for us, that nearly half of those employers did not have accessible or inclusive recruitment practices. Right? So you can get somebody as work ready as you want. If they go online to apply for a graduate scheme at some company, I won't name them, but yet their systems won't allow you to actually submit an application, or if you've got to go for an assessment, the assessment centre or the online platform isn't accessible. You know, then you are actually preventing that person from having that opportunity. A quarter of them said they wouldn't even consider employing somebody who's visually impaired. So with all the employment support in the world, we've also got to change attitudes. I'm a strong believer that that's what we need to do, and I really hope, and I obviously clearly have shared all of this with the government and many meetings on this issue, because I think that is also a key plank that's sometimes missing from this. And I know that they've asked the former head of John Lewis, Charlie Mayfield, to do this, to look into some of this work, and I'm going to be meeting him myself in a couple of weeks, because obviously I want this element of it to work, because for far too long, I meet disabled people who are amazing graduates, or disabled people who have already, had a good education and just looking for opportunities. And those spaces are not being created. We are not asking to be treated special. We're just asking to be treated equally. And that's what we have to get right as well.
I'm sure, so as an employer, I look at this closely, and I'm sure there was research showing that the average cost to make reasonable adjustment for somebody with a disability, it's really small. Like it's minimal. Like even the tiniest SME can do, can adapt very, very easily to, and yet I think there is just this fear that, it would cost me an enormous amount of money. We don't have that balance sheet strength. We just can't. And it's just not true.
And also, I think as well with that, I mean, it's about awareness as well, because a small business who may with 8 people may not be able to see how they could do it, right? But there are schemes like the Access to Work scheme. And I used to say it was the best kept secret in terms of employment support, because not everyone knew about it, but more and more people do. Although the research we did showed that nearly half of them didn't know about it. But by the by, that there will provide the employee with all the necessary resource to have all the reasonable adjustments they need within their workplace. So great schemes like that, adequately resourced, can make all the difference. I feel as though we should be talking about access to work for every mechanism. That should always be part of it, because that's where the awareness raising comes into it. When we look at disabled people, we should never be like an add-on or this nice to have, or let's be a disability confident employer. Every employer should be disability confident, right? Regardless of who they are. We shouldn't just be seen as a special case because we are not. But for too long, there has been inadequate investment and resource into that targeted support. Job centre pluses, I mean, they're hostile in their shape, and I think we need an overhaul in terms of culture and so forth and operations. But all of those, the tools that you would use in a job centre, they're not accessible for a visually impaired person to use. And so you've got to break down those barriers before you start wanting to talk about taking away people's support. It's just, nonsense. And it will only cost more in the long run, not to mention the stress, worry, anxiety. In the meantime, that it's going to cause that person and their family. And so I can't stress enough that the government are making a wrong choice. And if they don't rethink it now, it will cost us in the long run.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco. Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
The government's changes to PIP will have big consequences for family carers, like Ginny, who cares for her husband Tim, who has myotonic dystrophy. Ginny holds her husband's hand to keep him steady as he walks. He falls frequently and chokes on his food. Ginny is the sole earner in the family. She works part-time on top of caring for Tim. But she's calculated that under the government's cuts, her family will lose £12,000 a year. So can the Prime Minister tell Ginny and many family carers like her, what does he expect them to do?
Mr. Speaker, we have approached this on the basis of the principles that we must support those who need support. On the question of getting people into work, that we should support people into work where they can work, and of course, where they can work, they should.
I think also the discussion has kind of been wrong because it starts from accepting the premise that there are loads of people out there who are cheating the system who could work but don't. And that, to me, is the most disappointing aspect. Accepting that fundamental premise that loads of people are on welfare when they shouldn't be, when really there is zero evidence to support that.
Exactly.
But where does that stem from? I'm trying to understand where it comes from. There is plainly a difference between the UK and comparative countries. Post-pandemic, our rates of labour market participation are lower. It hasn't recovered to the same degree, and I can't work out why. I think there's been a big drive in this country to sort of achieve parity between mental health and physical health. And I applaud that. But does that become a problem if it's extended to welfare? Because it seems to me that a visually impaired person or a wheelchair user has very different needs for support or adjustment to someone who has severe anxiety. And so have we ended up in a one-size-fits-all environment where you either tick the box or you don't, instead of looking at tailored help for everyone to fulfill their full potential?
It does, Alex. And that's why I go back to the point. If you think about employment, you've got to have good quality targeted support because no one person is the same as the next person. Okay. And I appreciate, you want to simplify things, but actually you've got to use the right approach and tools to enable that person to get the right support to enter the labour market. And when it comes to the social security system, I think we need to remember what it's there for. Social security is there as a safety net. Okay. And at the moment, there are gaping holes in that net because of 14 years of austerity and hollowing out. And we've got to rebuild that because, it needs to be in a state where it actually does help people. We are an ageing population, so naturally there are going to be more people that need to rely on it. Remember, most people have paid into the system through their needs.
Well, this is
right?
it. It should be
so that
the
is what it's there for.
contribution.
Yeah.
And this is another thing that I think in the Green Paper not enough people have picked up on, the difference between current claimants and future claimants. And it does seem that they're trying to reduce the amount or freeze the amount or narrow the eligibility for people who will require it in the future.
Kendall was very keen today to point out
so
that
don't
this is
get
about
ill, guys.
narrowing
don't
the
get
access.
sick. Don't get disabled.
This won't affect you, who are already in receipt, not yet. But it's about making the door narrower to reduce the people coming through.
But if you think about the contributions element, this is also in the Green Paper.
Where's the social contract? If you've paid 10, 20, 30 years and you
become
disabled.
I mean,
no, but then you qualify for a different part of it.
It means testing. But if you've paid into the system, so what the Green Paper also will introduce is it's a new form of the contributions-based support. Currently, we had contributions ESA and contributory JSA, job seekers allowance. So doing away with all of that and just going to have one form of contributions-based, but it will only be paid for 12 months.
Yeah.
That's another cut. In many respects. The JSA element of that was only ever for 6 months. We get that. But now, if you've become ill or disabled as you've got to leave work, you will only get that support for 12 months. Okay, yes, you can go on a means-tested form of UC, universal credit.
But if you live
with somebody who's working or you've got savings, and you won't get any income replacement. And the
unintended consequence of that is going to be that there are going to be more people separate. Yeah. It is going to increase crime. It's going to make more people destitute. I mean, that is the reality of this. I keep saying this to my own MP. I keep saying it as much as I can through social media. And I'm really surprised that more journalists haven't picked up on it.
I worry about that, actually.
You are dead right. The contributions-based part of the support allowance bit of ESA, the budget line is being reduced from 13 billion to under 4 billion in 2 years.
That is a big drop, isn't it?
That's a huge drop.
And that is going to leave so many people completely destitute. And I think it is unforgivable. I think it's sociopathic. And I think it's going to really, really hurt Labour at the next election unless they do what Marsha is saying and have a real rethink.
Why is Liz Kendall so angry all the time? Seriously, why is she so irate all the time?
She's always in fifth gear.
Look, there is a serious question behind me being facetious. A green paper is meant to be a basis for a conversation.
That's right, yeah.
So why be so defensive about everything that is in it? If you didn't want to have a conversation, put out a draft bill. Say this is what we're doing. But don't pretend to be having a conversation and then not listen to what anyone else
and that's what
saying.
People said at the lobby today. They really want to have that engagement with the government on the proposals in the Pathways to Work paper. And I really hope the government are going to seek to do that.
Great.
Because that's going to be really important. It's okay, you may not want to co-produce it, but you absolutely need to engage and consult on these proposals because they will make a huge difference, particularly around the employment support, because actually there are some experts by experience that could share so much that maybe as a government they haven't thought about.
Yeah.
But, remember, a lot of the social security changes, they're going to just bring forward legislation. That's not even in the Green Paper, worryingly. And so, we need to, for me, the focus really needs to be to stop that legislation from being brought forward. I can't say it enough, and you should all be telling your MPs to do the same. Actually,
you know what? We were going to do a call to action and offer it to you. What would you advise listeners to if they want to take action?
Is there a charity that's doing great work?
Loads of charities are doing brilliant work, and I recently just became the chair of the all-party group on disability as well. So I'm really pleased that we've got that vehicle in Parliament. But to all the listeners out there, these changes to personal independence payment and to universal credit are the wrong choice, and they're going to crawl and they will push disabled people further into poverty. So my ask of you all is to please lobby your MPs, write to them, go to their surgeries, and you tell them you cannot support this bill.
Quiet, riot. And now it's time for some much needed good news. It's time for Grin and Share It. I love that you love our puns.
They're hilarious, yeah.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
What have you got for us, Naomi?
Well, Kenny, there's some good news for you. There's a gonorrhea vaccine, so you'll be all right.
Apparently it's only 30%.
Jesus, viciously attacked. He doesn't even know what's going on.
That was a drive-by, wasn't it? I'm sorry.
Alex, really if you've got the number of my solicitor, please.
That's not the one I'm going with, though.
Siri,
what one of my
attorney.
What other diseases have I got today?
Like that weren't bad enough, right?
Okay,
let me tell you.
I've got, being serious, I have got a nice story. So given how upset the Island of Strangers speech made all of us, along with the inevitable backlash that Alex and I got for calling it out, I went in search of a positive story about migration, and I found a real gem.
Ooh.
A new art museum devoted to migration opened this week in Rotterdam, near the dock where Albert Einstein fled Europe to start a new life in the USA. It's called the Phoenix Museum, which is F-E-N-I-X, and it's the centrepiece of a regeneration project in the harbour, formerly home to Rotterdam's red light district, and Europe's largest Chinatown. And its opening comes at a time of obviously hardening rhetoric against immigration across the whole of Europe. The museum's director said it's not for us to tell people how they should feel about migration. We just want to enrich the view that people have about migration. And it's been designed by a Chinese architect. It opened with 3 exhibitions, including Suitcase Labyrinth, which is a collection of 2,000 suitcases, and they tell the personal stories of everybody from around the world that came with that suitcase, where they came from, what that journey was.
That's nice.
And as well as the exhibitions, it's got this huge indoor square on the ground floor so that people can connect and play host to cultural events that get curated by Rotterdam's myriad of different communities throughout the whole year. And I just thought, you know what, in an era of back-to-back negative story about migration, isn't it wonderful that somebody is doing something so lovely?
Love that.
Yeah, that is good. It's nice to have a overtly
Unashamedly.
Positive thing. I mean, I would point out that all museums are museums of migration. Of course.
Indeed. Whether they bought it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Elgin marbles.
Don't call them Elgin marbles. Have I taught you nothing? Thanks, Naomi. Listeners, as ever, we'll drop a link in the show notes so you can not just grin, but also share it.
And with sadness, that is the end of today's show. Our huge thanks to Marsha for joining us today.
Oh, well, a huge thanks to you guys for having me.
You were fab.
You'll have to come back on.
Yeah,
and before we're two.
Yeah,
absolutely. You can't just be our birthday girl.
We'll have to come and talk about the next PPA or something.
Yay.
Yeah, that'd be good, actually.
And I'll be rid of my gonorrhea by the time you come back as well.
Maybe we should...
You would have been vaccine and you're free.
No, we are looking forward to chatting to lots of you later today at our online editorial meeting, so please come brimming with ideas. And if you want to be at the next one, sign up to back us at ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod for as little as the price of one flat white a month.
We'll be back as usual at the weekend with Sunday School. So in the meantime, please remember to keep on rioting quietly.
And don't forget how much we love you. Bye.
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 Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome. Oh.
Brilliant start.
That'll be an outtake.